Hello, everyone. Today we have the wonderful Graybeard all the way from SSA. How are you doing today?
As on most days, I'm fabulous. Obviously, the degree varies, but today, well, it's a holiday here in South Africa, so it's been a very chill day. It's been pretty cool.
Oh, what holiday is it?
Well, South Africa is very generous. So we've just had Easter weekend, and because we have a very religious past, because Easter weekend is a holiday, but it's a Sunday, we get the Monday after a holiday as well, so that we actually get a day off work. So we're celebrating Easter Sunday on Monday.
Double dipping. I like it.
Absolutely.
Oh, speaking of Easter, which was yesterday, we also had this other really small event, in comparison at least, called the Rocket League Copenhagen Major. Did you get a chance to watch any of that?
Yeah, I watched pretty much most of it. I think the only one I struggled with was Swiss on Friday, which is always a little bit of a clown show trying to keep up with everything. Other outside of Limitless, and I was also kind of committed to stuff, but I got most of it. But the weekend stuff I definitely got.
Yeah, I have to say the Swiss stage, the first round went about how I expected. And the teams that got through are somewhat what I expected. But from round two forward was just pure chaos.
Yeah, it was. I think there was only one matchup I think it was Furia that upset all the seeded matchups in the first round. So it was like, okay, we all know where this is going, but the chaos built over time. It was actually great, which is really what you want out of a Swiss. And I think why it exists is you want to have those upsets and uncertainties and Casey going down and Vitality going down. It's like, wow, what is going on here? So yeah, very, very enjoyable.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most, I think out of the whole day was, I mean, other than like mates winning it, which it surprises me, but at the same time kind of doesn't, was just how close the number one seeds are from the different regions. It was like you had Falcons and K Corp. Even though K Corp won on the playoffs, they beat them in the best of five. And
yeah.
Even
those playoff, I mean, that playoff series was just that Casey Falcons game was just fantastic. So yeah. Well, look, in my estimation, from what I mean, the talk is always so North America, EU, who's better between the two, but the storyline for me is, when do we see a non-North America or EU team taking a major? And it feels like we're getting closer. Sam and Mina are really realistically one of those two regions most likely to upset that apple cart in the hopefully near future. But I'm enjoying that storyline. But just how good, I mean, Mina is just, it's amazing what they've done there.
Oh yeah, seeing the Falcons get that close, I think once they kind of got that lead in Game 7, I think they were just like, let's not make mistakes. And
yeah, sort of playing not to lose rather than finishing it out. Yeah,
it's like, hey, you're doing something that's working. It got you a goal. You should keep doing it until it stops working. Versus like, all right, let's just play it. But at the same time, Falcons have some of the best defense in the world, if not the best defense in the world. So I can kind of see putting your hands in, or your faith in that, and be like, yeah, I think we can hold off KC for 2 minutes, which doesn't sound as crazy when you have the Falcons, but
yeah, but it is. Look, and I also think there's also the case of seeing the finish line. You know, when you've been on LAN and you're kind of used to winning, as KCR, as Vitality are, and these other teams. I mean, Falcon have been on LAN and they've performed well, but there's sometimes in those big moments, if you're not used to closing out huge events, you almost become afraid of the finish line. You know, you're ahead. All you got to do is hold on for another 2 minutes, and you're going to make it through. And you let that intimidate you. And I don't know if that's the case, because they are quite experienced, all of those players. But but sometimes that is in those very big moments.
Yeah, and especially like Rocket League is only 5 minutes. It takes 2 seconds to have that thought. And then
Yeah.
as soon as you have that thought and start thinking about it, then your mind's not in the game.
Yes.
And it could be any other thought too. It could be like, oh my gosh, we're about to win. It's like, oh, I hope I can hold off on this. Or man, I hope they're not doing this. Or like there's a whole lot of thinking that can happen in 5 minutes. And when you only have 5 minutes, every second matters.
Yeah, and in those 5 minutes, too much thinking is also not too good. But you're quite right. You have that instant thought, and it does impact your game. I mean, I can't tell you the number of ranked games I've lost because the last 10 seconds and you're up by a goal and you're like, okay, we just got to see this out and let the ball bounce. The number of 0-second goals I've conceded only to lose in overtime is a lot because you just kind of like, okay, I got this one.
Yeah, that was a lot of series. What was that? I'm trying to think. What G2 did it so many times. I'm trying to remember like which one I'm thinking of specifically. But like when Daniel hit that flip reset goal, or
yes,
to like bring it into what should have been overtime. But then they get the kickoff, and then they score again on 0 seconds.
Yeah. Absolute heartbreaker. But speaking of the overtimes, I mean, G2 were overtime monsters. I mean,
if they figure out how to win overtime, they're the major champions.
If you get G2 into an overtime, it's as good as having lost. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so what was your experience watching the boys? Like, what did you, as somebody who's followed them all the way through up until this point, like, what was the thing that you noticed about them that you think they're going to bring back to the region?
We're talking about Limitless now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess on the one hand, I mean, they performed, I think, as expected. I mean, they didn't win a game. So, and I think most expected that. I was a little disappointed. I think they could have been, they played against OG and they took them in game one to overtime, a long overtime, like 3 and a bit minutes, and which they lost. And I think if they win that overtime, the entire complexion of the weekend changes, and maybe they go to round 5. So it was, and I spoke with Snowy a little bit, and he was very frustrated that they weren't more competitive in a lot of those games. But normally what we do is when they get back, we'll have a chat and just try and understand, what did they gain from that? What did they learn? But I'm trying to, from my perspective, what's being highlighted is that team have done incredibly well to keep a very high level standard of Rocket League in this region. They just continue to dominate. They very, very rarely lose, which is fantastic. And that's hard to do when you don't have people better than you to kind of keep you sharp. It's hard when you're at the top to keep yourself there. And they've done it throughout two and a half seasons now. But the gulf between them and the top of EU or NA is huge. And that's the area of concern for me, and what I would like to figure out how that is closed. I mean, I say that like I'm involved with the team, but that would be my conversation: is how are we going to close that gap, because it's very, very clearly there. And I do think they perform better than they have. So they are improving, but I feel like there's urgency for us to accelerate the level of improvement. So it was good to see that they played better. It's probably the best I've seen them play on a LAN, but we're still not taking games. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I think some of it looked like nerves, because there's a few open net whiffs that were just like, you hit the crossbar or something like that, but just like complete whiffs that I saw, and I was like, okay, like that's nerves. Like that's something that they've got to learn to deal with. That's not necessarily like their Rocket League ability that's in question, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, and I wonder if it's I mean, there's a play style thing. They have a play style that works here, which is they they very easily get themselves into dominating positions, and we often see them. They strangle opponents through just sheer pressure, keeping the ball up in their half, and just that sort of washing machine of bringing the ball round, having a shot, stealing boost, maybe getting a demo, and just going around and around and until they're until you've sort of beaten your opposition into submission. Fantastic play style. It works very successfully over a long period of time. But doing that against K Corp or OGs or LG is a different story, because these are teams that are far more capable, far more adept at dealing with that sort of thing. So then Limitless are finding themselves facing the sort of pressure they're used to exerting. And I mean, one assumes there have been conversations around that, but there have to be conversations and practice around changing things up to face a team that's sort of better than you from a pace point of view and from a mechanical point of view. So there was a little bit of that, and preparation wasn't fantastic. The entire team got there 2 days before the start of the major. It's not a lot of time, and then there's always issues with getting scrims and all of that. So preparation is an aspect, but then obviously there's what works against your SSA opposition not going to work against the top four of North America and EU.
yeah, I think the one thing that they definitely like an easy answer for like what SSAs like got to work on is like they need to establish a play style. Like for right now, it feels like, yeah, let me copy this from NA, or let me try and steal this setup from EU, or let me try and do this. Like there hasn't been a team that's like, this is how SSA plays.
Right.
Like Mina and Sam really brought up like physicality. I talked about this on my last podcast, where like the ping difference affected the way that they played individually, and so that affected the way that they played as teams. So like Mina, they had a ping difference, and so what they did is they made sure every first touch was a complete control touch, and then they just went from there. Because to deal with ping, if you're on the ball, you're the only one influencing it, and therefore you really don't have to deal with ping. Sam, on the other hand, they go, okay, we're a quarter, or 400 milliseconds or whatever behind the person. So we're just going to pre-jump everything and try and be there first and make hard reads. And so that's how they kind of develop their play style.
That's kind of I think it's a. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just saying. I feel like there needs to be something, not just because I feel like NA is doing this a little bit too, where it's like EU's working, let's copy EU, versus like let's innovate. Like what Mina and Sam did as far as like their play styles go, and it's primarily through like they're ranked or whatever. Like they innovated in a way that made them unique, that also made them a very specific type of threat when they get on the pitch. Obviously there's some melting pot and stuff like once you come to lands and everything, but they had that first, and that's what made them, Falcons have been to a grand final before.
Yeah.
On land, so it's.
Well, I think I think that's a very astute observation, and I do think we need some fresh ideas about how we approach this. We have a number of challenges, but one of them is we have a small player base. So we have to, at grassroots and all of that, we need to expand and have more people playing Rocket League. But I think we do need fresh ideas in terms of how we channel players through, and like how the younger players approach the game, because we need to do something different. And my concern with Limitless kind of dominating everything at the top is that below that, everyone else is kind of content to be second place. So they're all kind of racing to see if we can be second place, and that's very dangerous. So firstly, they need fresh ideas on how they take down Limitless, so we're not no longer a one team region, and there can be more competition for that single spot that we've got at the top. And then we need fresh ideas on how we play Rocket League in the global sense, because it is, as I said, I do think we're improving. But if we're going to accelerate that and establish a play style, I think that's a great observation. But what else is there that we can and should be looking at? And Snowy is the leader of Limitless, and he's probably got this season. I don't know if he's gonna. He keeps saying he's gonna retire, but I don't know if he will or won't. But we need something new coming from the rest to shake things up here.
Yeah. So I think here's the interesting question for me, just because I don't know that side of the Rocket League culture over there. Like, who is, like, if you talk to Snowy or somebody like that, who would they be like, that's the pro that I grew up watching that I wanted to be like?
That's an interesting question, because I'm not sure I know the answers. I mean, I know Rocket League players who are keen to go competitive, who are as young as 12, and then as old as Snowy is, sort of 23. And I know from my early conversations with Snow, I mean, he's old enough to be a Kronovi fanboy. That's how far back he goes. But the younger guys, sort of 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, tend to be existing pros. Apparently, Jack is a huge one of the guys who do content generally tend to be more popular because they are more visible. But other than those couple of obvious ones, I actually don't know, and it's not really a question I've asked. So it's an interesting question, just because I'm not entirely sure who it would be. But it would probably be Europe, and I know there's a lot of fans here of the MENA guys, Falcons, Rule One, Twisted Minds. So probably those two regions. Within that, who are the... I'm not entirely sure. And I will say this, though. Reunion Island, which is a division of, or a part of, France. I mean, name a French player, and that's absolutely the people. I mean, their play style follows a very similar pattern to the French. So that's a massive influence for that island, for obvious reasons, the language, culture, and all of that. So, of course, there's a bunch of the Reunion players that I run into in lobbies, and they've all got some version of Zen in their name.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll have a Juicy in their name after this split.
I got to tell you, I have only ever bought 2 esport decals. The first one I ever bought was Limitless, but I bought the Gentlemates decal just because it's pink, and I love everything pink, and most of my items that I use in Rocket League are the pink painted version, and I love their decal, so I bought that as well. And so I didn't buy the decal because I was a fan of the team. I bought the decal and then became a fan of the team. I loved what they did during the regionals or the qualifiers, because they were just consistently underrated, and then were doing well. And they almost seemed like a snipe team, because no one rated them, no one was talking about them, but then they came and cleaned up. So I've become a huge fan of Gentlemates and what they did this weekend.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last year, like, Joyo tweeted out, he was like, about him, like, I'm trying to think, like a year and a half ago. It was like, yeah, like Juicy's next.
I saw that tweet, yes.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, he has proven that he knows ball. So I think
we got to get him into the spotter role. Maybe I can ask him to come and watch some local streams, find our future prodigies.
Yeah. I think when it comes to scouting talent in general, like, how does SSA even go about doing that? I know, like, in NA at least, it's a little more friendship based. It's becoming less so now. But
So it's one of the areas I'd like to see resolved, because we are very. It tends to be a popularity contest here, which frustrates me enormously. And then the six mans is about as bad as you might expect anywhere, but it's much smaller. Um, so, but it's also a bit of an advantage because it's not such a huge scene. If you are somewhat good at the game, you do get noticed fairly quickly. However, an area of SSA specifically that I'm pushing a lot of my focus into is in schools, and starting to try. So schools esport here is growing. It's growing massively, and all of these schools have Rocket League teams. So we have, in South Africa for this season, I think it's something like 160 Rocket schools that have signed up. Wow. And some schools have more than one Rocket League team. So you're looking at around 200 Rocket League teams, and many of those are going to be sort of your low rank. Hey, this looks like fun, and you're just going out for a good time. But we don't have a solid funnel from schools Rocket League into the community of Rocket League. So I'm going to be working with. There's in fact, it's the esport org that does the broadcasts of RLCS, ACGL, African Gaming, and they're driving. It's their initiative that they're driving into these high schools. So there's a couple of things we're doing. Is one, how do we connect all of those teams with our community discords, and we have a pretty healthy and growing community Rocket League thing. And then secondly, how do we scout talent? I mean, the age is now 13, which is, when the age was 15, you go, okay, you want to find 12-year-olds that can be nurtured and guided and coached and helped, so that in 3 years they can compete in Rocket League. If it's 13, now you're looking for 9 and 10-year-olds. It's crazy. So we're gonna have to start thinking about primary school, but that's not on the radar for now. But in June this year, we're actually having a nationwide talent search, which is going to be 16 and under in order to compete, and we're going to have about 4 or 5 sort of people who can recognize talent when they see it. And we're just going to run a series of tournaments, and we'll stream all of it and have these scouts watch the players. And then we're going to, from there, hopefully pick 5, 6, 8, maybe 10 players, and then sort of funnel them into some sort of competitive coaching scene to kind of help them on their journey. But so this is a very long way for me to have answered your question on scouting talent. But it is one of the many holes in our system, but that's the beginning of starting to hopefully plug that hole.
Yeah, well, if it makes you feel any better, NA really doesn't even have a system, even with as large as we are. That does
make me feel a little bit better, but
that's still more coordinated and still more thoughtful than most of NA foster talent. It's like, okay. Most of the time it's either pop off and be number 1 and 2s, or top 10 and 2s. Then they're like, he's maybe good, but he's too chasey to be a 3s player. Or they pop off in 1s, and they're just like, he's good at 1s, but does he know how to rotate?
Yes.
And
I think
the thing is that doesn't happen if they're friends with somebody.
And listen, and the friends thing is an issue around the world, and again, it speaks to the age of the competitors, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. You're viewing the world very differently to how you eventually do when you're a grown up and out in the world and have a bit more life experience. And that friends thing is an issue all around the world. But what EU and North America have going for them is that by sheer weight of numbers, there will be players rising to the top, and that will eventually stand out. In our example, our scene is too small. We can't afford to just let it, without any help, hopefully pop out 1 or 2 competitive players. We as people in the community, people that are passionate about the game, have got to do this sort of thing to kind of foster it, nurture it, to get a lot more people playing the game. But then once they're playing it, find ways for for those who even have a little bit of talent to find a way to be channeled in a direction where they may be able to compete. So it's an imperative for us.
Yeah. My fear is you guys are going to figure out this absolutely amazing system, and then every other region's going to copy it.
That would be fantastic.
It would be the most ironic thing. Like, hey, we finally built a system for like properly funneling talent and like building up, and then every region is going to be like, ooh, we should be doing that. And then, maybe SSG, or not SSG, but SSA runs Rocket League for a year, and then everybody's like, how is this happening? Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it is, I liken it a little bit to, a physical sport I used to be very passionate about and followed for a long time is cricket, which I know Americans don't know too much about. But in the global sense, there's like 9 or 10 countries that are the main, the top teams in the world. And in the mid-1990s, the country of Sri Lanka was brought into the fold, very similar to how SSA was brought into Global Rocket League. And they were horrendous. They used to show up for these international matches and get absolutely hammered. And it took them about, I think, 6 or 7 years of just grinding it out and doing whatever they did. And then they won a world championship in the early 2000s. And that was like, it was like, what on earth just happened? This team that everybody used to love meeting up because it was, you padded your stats. It was freelo or whatever the cricket version of that was. So it is going to take a bit of time, but of course that is the dream. We quietly work away, and everybody keeps underrating us, and right now that's fair. But then comes one day we make it into a top 8, and then the next land we're in the top 4, and then one day we win, and then it changes. But it is I'm realizing now as I'm speaking to you about it that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing, because the better you do, the more you attract resources. Brands and money and resources in general will follow success. So if I get an SSA team into the top 8, suddenly someone pays attention and they go, oh, maybe we should sponsor this, and because of that you get a bit more success, and that attracts more of that. But in the meantime, we have to grind it out here and figure out a way to do it, which I guess is the ongoing theme with us, is we have to, how do we figure this out and get ourselves better than where we are?
Yeah, I think without the easy answer of just like, because this is something that the Falcons did. Like, they brought in a bunch of coaches, and like they tried them out, but they ended up bringing Nick on last year for the last split to help groom become a better coach and help develop them. And they made top 8 at Worlds when they did that. Now, obviously, the money differential between Falcons and the orgs and SSA is quite substantial at the moment. But do you think that's the path forward for SSA, is bringing on some of these highly qualified coaches from other regions to try and develop that? Or do you think that's going to almost in a way stifle SSA's like creativity and becoming its own region, in the fact that it's like, hey, we brought on this EU coach, so they're going to be EU 2.0, versus SSA.
Well, here's my thought on that. Is there's an adage in any industry or field that you go and study. You have to understand the rules and be good at it so that you know how to break the rules. And I feel like that's the level there is so much about the rules of Rocket League, that intimate knowledge that we don't have, and we need it in order to then figure out what rules we can break and how we can do something that's unique or different. So I do think there is huge merit in what you've just said, bringing on people with knowledge and expertise. Of course, the economic situation here is very different to Saudi Arabia, for example, where there tends to be a little more cash floating around. But so we're doing a couple of things to try and bridge the gap. Right now, I've had a bunch of players sign up for a coaching program, and I've gotten a number of coaches, including one of them's the Ground Zero coach out of OCE. Nick is another one, the M80 coach, and three or four others who are now doing coaching sessions, not one-on-one stuff. Right now, they're doing seminars or workshops, like a 2-hour seminar taking on a particular topic, whether it's, sort of mentality or how to practice or how to, what it takes to be a top level Rocket League player. So once a week we'll have these sessions, and these guys can come into that. And it's very small and fledgling, and it's just gotten underway. But that's the beginning we need knowledge sharing, where there are levels of knowledge that our players just don't have because of a lack of experience, and so much that they haven't found out for themselves. So hopefully these coaches can bring some of that knowledge. And then secondly, and the big controversy last season, of course, is region unlock and EU players, coming and playing here. And I've reached a point where I actually would love EU bubble players to come and play here, but not as full EU teams. Pick up local players, come and pick up a roster with 2 local players and just compete. But it's asking a lot. I get it. It's a bit of a fantasy, because you're effectively saying to somebody who could, with a full EU team, get top 8 here or top 4. You're saying, well, go for top 32 and make a couple of $100. So I'm asking for a level of selflessness that probably doesn't exist. But I would love to see that mixed teams. If we had a huge number of EU players playing with our players, I think it starts to breed fresh new ideas. So I do think there's part of a solution in this whole region unlock thing. I haven't figured out exactly how it works, but that is something, and the coaching. But yes, I would love to get. In fact, I messaged a whole bunch of coaches like Verge and Greg, and I've messaged them all and said, hey, come and do a session. A session or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever you can do. So hopefully we can build up an army of EU and NA coaches who've had experience and come and teach us stuff. Yeah. And then get to a point where there's someone like, okay, you come and coach a local team all the way through. But I think we're a way off from that from a resource point of view.
Yeah, I think one of the things that might be interesting is like getting some CRO players. Because if you look at, even though they may not be like top of EU, like I think if you took some of the...
I'm actually just making a note because I'm going to forget that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, like, because if you look at CRL and where it's at now, most CRL players are comfortably top 64 in their region.
Yes.
To top 32.
Yes.
Occasionally you'll see one like Lion Blaze and Percy, or I can't remember. It's Percy and Lion Blaze, or if it's Percy or Lion Blaze and Zanil that were CRL at the time. But like, yes, those are 2 players that, they made it up there. You have players like Vegas, who was constantly top 32 from Canada. Like, there's a whole bunch of players that are they Zen? Like, are they juicy? No, but are they teams that have been good enough to at least go and face them? And I think that level of experience of being like, okay, like we've been in a top 32 in EU, and we've been there a couple times, because there's a bunch of teams that are just below that I think is still competitive enough for SSA to bring in that healthy competition and healthy mindset, because a lot of them are on that trajectory as well, because they're trying to compete with the top of EU, and quite honestly, they're probably a little bit closer than SSA as a region.
Yeah, I think there's huge merit in that, because we started off by talking about the gulf between Limitless, the top team in our region, and the top 8, or even the top 16 of in the world. I mean, there's a huge gap. But then the gap between Limitless and everybody else in this region, there's a huge gulf. I mean, there's 1 or 2 teams that might become challengers that are a lot closer. But for the most part, there's a huge gulf that would benefit immeasurably by that level of player being involved with them, either through coaching or just playing with and competing with them. So, as I said, I've made a note. I wonder if there's any merit in a college sort of taking on a. Sorry, I'm having ideas but I think it's a great suggestion.
This is what I wanted this whole conversation to be about. Is us just spitballing random ideas, and it's like, ooh, maybe this could work. Oh, what about this? Like, because I think SSA is on its way up, and I think like once SSA starts to pick up, like I think APAC's already starting to get there as well. I don't think they've gotten the attention that SSA got, just simply because SSA is just finally getting a major spot.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, the CRL, I think like partnering with colleges, I think that could be a really interesting like internship.
Huge.
Oh yeah, like an internship program or like a study abroad type program, maybe. Like there's the possibilities with college money is endless. You know,
absolutely. And you know what's interesting to me about that is that I had an EU player, reach out to me, and he's quite interested in himself and 2 other EU players coming out to play from here. So coming to South Africa for the next split and trying to compete. And he had some questions about whether it's workable or not. But interestingly enough, he's attending college, and they have told him that he's not allowed to do it because they're very concerned about the negative pushback, that potential for the university itself of one of their players coming out here and taking a major spot or taking money from local players, which is interesting. That was interesting to me that the college was concerned about that. But you talking about this, I go, there's a huge spin in the other direction where, partner with the region, get your players advice. So it's interesting that there's already a public perception concern from their end, but I think there's a huge public benefit for them to be involved. I'm getting more and more excited about it as we talk.
Like you had one team go about and do it the wrong way, and therefore the coming there and becoming a part of the region is therefore bad. You know, like it's this public. That's the one thing I don't get is just like, or I get it from a certain perspective, but like just because somebody made a cake that tasted really bad doesn't mean that you shouldn't make cakes, you know? Like
no, I get that. And look, it's just muddied the water. They did do it the wrong way. And I vacillate. I go back and forth because I'm also not particularly in favor of a full roster a full EU roster coming out here. And well, look, the bizarre thing is an EU roster playing at the major in the SSA slot. I cannot get my head around that. So on the one hand, I'm talking about, come here, play with our players, integrate, and teach us things, but don't take our major spot. So it's still it's sensitive and weird.
Yeah, like I think because they have to be competitive enough that they can take that major spot for them to really grow the region. But at the same time, you don't want to have them take that major spot.
I know. So I was going to say it's a catch-22. It's not. Yeah. It's just I have to acknowledge that the amount of attention and eyes on this region as a result of all of this has been amazing, and it has been good for us. So how do we use that momentum? I do know this: we're not going to get to an internationally competitive level by ourselves, by practicing with ourselves, scrimming with ourselves, coming up with our own ideas. We need to know and understand all of the depth of knowledge and mistakes and things that have worked, that have not worked, and that has gone on in Europe, in North America. Mina, Sam. I mean, Sam, I've spent no time coming to understand why they've become as good as they have. I should probably spend some time there. So it's almost learning from the rest of the world and take the best from all of them to help us accelerate. So the answer lies somewhere, and it's always hard to find a perfect solution, and every idea you have will have its own problems. But we got to try something. We got to do something, because carrying on the way we are, it's gonna take us a decade to become competitive, and that's just too long for everybody.
Yeah, I think at that point, Unreal Engine 5 might actually be out,
Okay, you know what? Don't get too optimistic there. Sit down, mate. Oh, my.
Yeah. So I guess, pulling into kind of that space, like on the like development side of things, or like the technology side of things, what is it about SSA that I think, or like what is like the technology situation there, like the physical hardware, because that I just don't know much about the region as far as like economics go. So,
Okay. I mean,
like what is it like there, like is it hard to get GPUs? Is it hard to get good hardware?
Not at all. I mean, if you are sort of middle class, upper middle class, getting all of that stuff is not too difficult. And all of the top players on the, let's call it the top 4 local teams, all have the equipment you'd expect them to have. There are a number. We have a very small middle class, I guess, or the number of people that are not economically viable, I guess, or who struggle is huge, and so that's probably greater than anywhere in Europe or North America. Maybe Brazil begins to challenge it, and so the availability of all of this equipment is not problematic. But there is a definite economic line, and we're probably looking at the top 5% of the country are capable of doing and having access to the level of, whether it's console or PC to play something like Rocket League. There's huge growth in mobile gaming because that is accessible by the less people who don't have a lot of money. So mobile gaming is going to be huge here. And if we could somehow solve that problem, we have a huge population of people that would love to play something like Rocket League and get involved. But so it's there and available, but not to everybody, or to a pretty small portion of the population.
Yeah. So I guess with all of that, what do you think esports could be one of those things that brings SSA as a region, not just up in esports, so to speak, but just like up as like a whole nation, like could become something that is such an industry that it elevates the whole country? I know that's a very wild out there thing, but do you think that's like possible in any way, shape, or form that esports could elevate up?
The easy and lazy answer is yes. I don't know where this all stands in the US and in EU, but there's still a broad stigma attached to video games, and parents get very worried about their children playing video games, and there's no real comprehension or understanding of it. So again, to go back to the schools, one of the things we're planning with the events we're going to do is is conversations specifically with parents, getting parents into a school and having a conversation about what is esport, what does it mean, and so that getting the parents comfortable with the idea. So my fantasy, my dream is any school here, you're either academic or you're sporty. That's what it's always been. And you either sort of follow the sports track or the academic track. And I would love esport to be a third track, because there is no doubt there is room for it. And where we see the number of schools signing up for the high school leagues every year growing and growing, there is a need and a thirst for it. So the more that happens, the more esport starts to enter the mainstream. So coming back to your question, I think esport, without question, can play a role in the economy, in nation building, if you like, and playing a significant role in society. So yes, so it becomes that third coded thing. You got your genius child, you've got your athletic football child, and then you've got your esport prodigy child. So yeah, and I just don't know at what point where we pass that tipping point, but I'm encouraged by the growth of esport in schools.
Yeah, like that's something that like you're saying hundreds of schools are signing up for that. I don't know, what is the population of the country that you're in specifically that's like doing all this?
All right, and I have to, as we go out the gate, I have to be. I obviously have a bias because I am South African. I'm in South Africa. SSA, Sub-Saharan Africa, comprises, I believe, around 30 countries. It's hard to keep track of the list. But when it comes to Rocket League, South Africa, from a player base and strength point of view, is South Africa, followed by Reunion Island. So when I talk, I'm generally talking about those two places while we try and grow it in all the other countries. It's kind of like MENA. Everyone says Middle East, North Africa. In truth, it's Saudi Arabia. Yeah. So it's a similar sort of thing here. So Reunion Island, tiny little island, has a population of about 850,000 people. And South Africa has a population around 55 million. So by sheer weighted numbers, South Africa's far bigger. Was there two parts to your question? You asked about population and something else.
Yeah, so I'm trying to just like get like a reference point of like, is it all kind of centered around like a main city, and then it's like the supporting high schools?
Or yes.
So, like geographically, like, I'm just trying to get a grasp on like
what
this high school esports program is like developing as.
Okay, cool. So let's start with Reunion. Reunion's got one city because it's tiny. It's a tiny little island. It'd take you 30 minutes to drive across either way from coast to coast. And then in South Africa is a country is about the size of Texas. So from a size point of view, that's kind of how big South Africa is, or the size of South Africa. That's divided into 9 provinces, or for ease of reference, states, I guess. And there are obviously provinces that are wealthier than others and do better than others. But these high schools, and I'm saying 160 high schools have signed up. They're based in the province I'm from, which is the wealthiest province in the country, and then the one in the Western Cape, which is on the south coast. Predominantly, it would represent those two provinces, with a few from a couple of others. Then there are very poor provinces, and you would find at this stage probably very little representation from high schools. So I guess it's divided provincially is pretty much how it goes currently.
Okay. So kind of the typical 80-20 rule, where 20% of it, or 80% of what's happening is happening in 20% of the places.
Yes. Yeah, I think that exactly that. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if this gets big, because I know in the state I'm in, Arkansas, we're the first state in America to actually define esports legally.
Wow. Okay.
Definitely not something that you would think would come out of Arkansas, if you know anything about American culture. Okay. But like we one of the guys that I worked with at the college that I used to coach at, like he was just like, hey, like people are worried about the language of our law that could consider this gambling if we had like tournaments and stuff like that. Just by the technicalities of the actual letter of the law, not necessarily the
Okay,
intent
got you.
of it. And they were
Yes.
just like, hey, look, like, can we like define esports as this thing where it's competitive?
Okay.
It's not. We're not talking about like casino, like gambling
Got
type
you.
games and stuff like that. And
Yes.
just like made it a very clear and defined thing of what esports was, and
Okay.
so that's elevated a lot of colleges into being like, oh wait, like esports is like actually becoming a thing. And so yeah, I'm a part of the state that's has-
amazing, and
yeah.
I'm actually trying to think if South Africa has addressed esport in any sort of official capacity like that. I know, I think there's a government-appointed
Mhm.
committee or board or whatever. They call it mind sports.
Mhm.
So that's how they've kind of looked at it. So it's sport, but it's sport of the mind rather than physical, which I don't know if it's... So they include chess in that and video games, but they're
It's a
about
start.
as use.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a start.
Right.
Unfortunately, the board looking after it are about as useless as you can expect a government board to be, and they do very little and accomplish little. But there might be language in there that could be used and be helpful, actually.
Yeah, I think that's as we're talking about, not just legitimizing esports in like SSA, but just in general. Like that's one of my hopes with this podcast is like going on talking about just like sharing these stories means like, hey, look, like there's all these careers and stuff. Like, and outside of the careers perspective, just like this can be a healthy way to like build communities and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because I mean, just look at any of the lands. Like this land was a little bit smaller, honestly, really impressive for throwing it together in 5 weeks.
Yes.
Like just go on and like see like all the friendships that form over this that are lifelong friendships. We just, even if it's not the thing that ends up being your main thing, you meet a lot of people and you're exposed to a lot of things. You're exposed to a lot of cultures. Like if you were to be like, hey, I want you to go hang out with people from, what was it, 13 different countries this past major, I think. I'd have to look that up on Wikipedia.
Oh yeah, I was looking at it on Wikipedia. Definitely a lot, but yes.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
where would you typically do that, you know? Like actually like physically, like in person. It's like, oh, that happens more in esports, you know, as
Well, I
it
think
is
that's...
other sports.
I think that's probably the huge advantage now that you mention that and I think about it. If you look at inter-school sports, so, you know, if you play, you know, not everybody who plays football at school goes on to be a professional footballer. That's just not how it works. And some are very good at it, but no, you know, not everybody wants to go further with it. But you build up friendships, and you know the kids on your teammates on the football team you might remain friends with for many years. The advantage of esport is you can do that, but in a much... So let's take it in South Africa. You're far more likely to build a friendship with someone from an entirely different city, a different province, who's, you know, friends who are all over the country. And then as you play internationally, that becomes broader. And I think that's probably, well, it's certainly something I've pushed with parents that I've spoken to and say, you know, your son is building lifelong friendships with people all over the world. And you can't overlook that the importance of that, just from a mental health point of view, from a self-esteem point of view, from a networking point of view, when they go out into business, your Rocket League threes teammate, gets into an industry adjacent to yours when you get into business, and there's that relationship that carries on, or and so on. So I think that is probably something worth pumping up as a benefit and a highlight.
Yeah, and it's also, if you carry yourself well, like you can get a reputation in sorts and be good enough, maybe not necessarily friends, but good enough like acquaintances with people.
Yes.
That you can be just like, okay, hey, yeah, like, I turned 30 yesterday and I did sales for 7 years. And so the amount of contacts in my phone is like pushing 1,700 people.
Wow.
And so like, if you're in sales for any amount of time, that's not that big of a number, but to the average person, like that can be a lot. But through that, it's like, okay, everybody knows like I do these certain things, but they also know that I just talk to everybody and have everybody's number. And if they're trying to find something, they can be like, hey, JC, I'm looking for somebody that can do this really niche thing. Who do you know? It's just like, all right, cool. Give me like a half hour to like go through my contacts and like have them go through their contacts and do that. But then now do that in esports where almost every guy loves video games. And so like, if there's one thing that can bring dudes together, and it is video games. And so it's just like, oh yeah, that dude I was playing Rocket League with, or Helldivers 2 with, or whatever game that's popular at the moment. It's like, oh yeah, like that's cool dude. Oh yeah, he does that one thing. I wonder if he knows anybody that could help my friend out, or that has like what my friend needs.
It's so fascinating you mentioned that, because I'm in the process of establishing a database for myself, because as I go through, like, I'll meet you and we on the podcast, I want you in that database, not just for the esports stuff, but I get a lot of pleasure from like connecting people up. And, as I go through all these things, I go, man, you do this and that guy does that, or someone reaches out to me and says, oh, they're trying to do that. And I go, this is the perfect guy. I'd love to like connect people up. Exactly, pretty much what you're saying. So whether it's for the benefit of yourself and your own business, or connecting people. I mean, we all know it's been proven time and time again that having a large network is incredibly valuable. And I think done right, coming out of esport, you can build that very, very healthy, broad network.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to just life in general, just not just knowing and meeting people, but sitting down and having conversations with them that are like just honest, like getting to know you. Like, I'm learning about Reunion Island for the first time. Hashtag American school system. But like these are the conversations that like getting to hear perspectives and different worldviews and different takes on things, and being able to put yours forward and then get pushback and stuff like that. Like, it kind of stops the like hyper polarization and like echo chambering that tends to happen. And so as much as the internet creates echo chambers, like it ironically is also the solution to stop them.
Yes. And that's so. I guess there's measure in everything, the internet as a thing is not all bad, it's not all good. Everything we do has got measure, and I think there's esport is finding its balance, and it's going through this weird period of it's been a very bleak few months with all the layoffs, and then in Rocket League we didn't know what was happening. Is the sport dying? Is it even going to be around? Are they trying to kill it? Are they trying to? And I think it feels like an overcorrection, because I do think there was so much money being poured into esport. and even Rocket League itself, as horrible as it was for the talent crew to be shaved down, I think we can all agree it was a little bit unsustainable the way it was. So now we've sort of overcorrected to the other side, but somewhere along the line we're going to find our balance in things, our place in the world. It's going to make its way properly into school systems and into society at large. So as every other sport and industry has over time, you have your hype cycle, and it feels like esports sort of coming out of a hype cycle, overcorrect, and we'll find some balance over the next few years. But it has huge value. I mean, we always hear about the negative things, and people talk about toxic communities, and we've all had our experiences with toxic teammates, toxic opponents, toxic this, toxic that, but we don't generally get to hear the good news side of it, and the enormous benefit to self-esteem and confidence. The stereotypical gamer is the guy locked in his basement who never comes out and is always in the dark, never touches grass. I think that is changing. There is a different perception of esport, and you love to see it on the weekend at the major. After every goal, after every game, the players are reaching for their water. They're drinking water. I mean, if nothing else, the Rocket League players have been a fantastic advert for drinking water, and there's more emphasis on that. So we will find out how to better extract all the huge benefits from esport, because there is a massive benefit.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to complain about us sitting down all day, I mean, chess has been around for how many centuries? and is allotted as one of the most mentally taxing sports of all time. And to a certain degree it is, but at the same time, it's almost to a point where it's memorization more than it is actually playing, as Mikael Tao put it. If we can get people to respect video games or esports in the way that they respect chess, I think that I think is the key thing that we as a community could key in on. But I think we have to, I talk about this all the time, but we have to have a language for what we're doing other than he's being aggressive. Oh, they're so defensive.
Yes.
This team likes to sit in net. It's I think as things develop, even though it may not be accessible to the average person, just having that shared language of nerding out on the tactics stuff, yes. I think will do so much for the esports. Just because, you're sitting around at a coffee shop and you hear someone go, oh yeah, they were running a stacked spear here with a delayed third. And people are just like, wait, what? Yes. Oh yeah, come on, this is entry level basics. Have you never played Rocket League before? It's there's a certain level of, that it can get too much. But if you look at NFL content, it is highlight plays, and then people being like, this is why this worked, and they're breaking down have you ever heard of banjo technique before?
I haven't.
Yeah, that's have you heard of cover six?
What sport are we talking about here, JC?
American football.
You must be joking. I know they also call it gridiron. That's about as far as my knowledge goes.
But no, that's the thing. If you look at I should know more about actual football. But yeah, having that language to discuss things.
I agree and disagree with that, because whether it's professional, hobby, sport, everything has their own. We develop language around the things we enjoy, and it becomes once you're in the inner circle, you kind of get it. Rocket League's advantage is that it is far, I think, more accessible to the casual viewer than any other esport.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggle with titles outside of Rocket League. I've watched Valorant, I've watched CS:GO, I get what's the other one? Apex. I just get lost. I have no idea what's going on there. But unfortunately, I just don't have the patience to come to understand those titles. So, but where I do agree with you is we've got to have the hooks. You know, and that comes through content. So the things like the highlight plays and the hyping up and someone saying this is why this was brilliant. And you know, I did one of the most popular videos I ever made, and it was kind of almost a throwaway video, was how to watch professional Rocket League. And it was literally, this is what the field looks, you know, this is what the HUD looks like. So you'll see this, that's the score, that's the thing, that's the boost, that's the whatever. And it was just like this throwaway video, and I've had more interaction with that video than anything else.
The throwaway videos are the ones that always work the best.
Yeah, I know, right? And the ones you bled your heart out have got like 12 views. But I think there's that sort of content gets people hooked. I mean, I was hooked on watching professional Rocket League long before I even understood it. In fact, when I started casting, I didn't know enough about Rocket League, and my thought was, I'll make up in enthusiasm what I lack in knowledge. So I would just lose my mind at everything. I mean, literally the first tournament and I ever casted, I didn't even know what a flip reset was. So it's kind of figuring out the ways to hype it up enough to sort of grab the initial interest. And once you're a little bit interested, then everybody wants to invest the time in understanding the nuances and language of it.
Yeah, and I think we're getting close to having that jumping off point. I think I think this kind of goes back to like what I've also said is like having like a decent tutorial in the game itself to like explain at least the basic idea of rotating isn't you guys driving in a circle, first goes, then second goes, then third goes.
Yes.
It's rotating is you leaving so your teammates can get in the play and you can grab boost and be in position, maintain momentum, and without going into too many nuances. But like, if the average player base doesn't get that,
how much of these problems can be solved with? I mean, we sort of joked about Unreal Engine 5. Because I mean, one of the big problems with the engine we're using now is that, as I understand it, and I don't have a high level understanding of these things, is that we're a little bit hamstrung on the sort of content that can be in the game. Or I guess if the development team's big enough, then that sort of content becomes more feasible in the game. But my understanding is with go ahead.
Yeah, so from the people that I've talked to about it, the game is 10 years old at this point, and so there's something called tech debt, and so technical debt is the name for it. But basically, they put the game out there, and they're like, okay, cool, like this is great, and then it just absolutely exploded, and so they're like, okay, like now we've got to handle a player base size that we didn't intend for. And then now it's like, okay, well, now we have this mechanic and the pace of play and all these different things in the real world that we didn't necessarily build this for. And then you go in and go, okay, well, we got to keep it running, but we need to keep it running, and we've got 12 hours. So we can't rewrite the game in 12 hours, but so we're going to fix this and patch it. And it's a small, relatively small development team. And then they push it out there, and then it breaks in a very specific way under certain circumstances because of that. And then it's like, okay, well, now we got to patch that. And so it's become spaghetti code over 10 years. And that's going to happen to almost any game over its lifespan. That's why most live service games get like a complete rework, not just like a constant update, unless you're talking about games like League of Legends, in which they built it up long term, and even they've had complete revamps.
Yes.
And so that's why it's difficult, because it's not just, oh, introduce a new map. It's, okay, well, we introduced a new map, but to do that, we're referencing back to all these different things. And then there's all this other code that might reference the game that we just put in, or the map that we just put in. And so now it's reading that versus what it should be reading under this. You know, it starts to look like that conspiracy board.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how code works. And so that's why, from the people that I've talked to that actually know what they're talking about, and that's the impression that I've gotten. And it kind of makes sense to a certain degree with how limited knowledge I have about it.
And do we have any reliable information that a rebuild or a sort of from the ground build up with UE5 is something that's actually happening?
The only thing that we have that kind of kicked off the whole conversation was Psyonix posted a job posting asking for Unreal Engine 5 experience. And then everybody was just like, ooh, they're making it in Unreal Engine 5. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And so
man, that's pretty thin.
It basically got leaked in a job posting, and they were like, yeah, we are, but we have no idea how long this is going to take. And it's been radio silence and a meme ever since.
Yo. That, oh man, that feels like a, yeah. And it's weird that there's been no new leaks. You know, anyway, who knows? I mean, but it goes back to the thing of, well, that makes it hard to have in-game content, because I think that would be fantastic. I mean, how awesome it would be to like open up the game and have a whole resource section of videos you can go and watch, or tutorials on what the hell is a flip reset, what's a half flip, and this is how you learn all of these resources that the community has bled into Rocket League, because honestly, this has been kept alive by people who do a lot of things for free, all the way from I always mention ball chasing and backers mod, and all the content creators, and so it's all there. But how do you? I mean, it would be fantastic if we could have it all, as much of it as possible, in game.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like with custom maps, like for people who build them, I'm starting to learn how to build them. Emphasis on starting. I still don't know much.
Fair enough.
But like, you can build something and it can work on the 15, 20 PCs of you and your friends that you built it for. But if somebody else loads it in, it may not be optimized enough for like their specific computer. And so it may take more than 30 seconds to load, and therefore it won't let them load the map. And so like there's a lot of stuff that the current engine limits, but at the same time, like they didn't expect it to get to where it is.
Yes.
This is they captured lightning in a bottle, and now they're like, what do I do with lightning? You're not supposed to be able to catch this.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like careful what you wish for, because you might get it.
Yes.
And what is it? If at first you do succeed, try not to look too surprised. Yeah.
Well, hey, it has been great talking to you. I got to go get ready for some scrims, but is there any last minute things that you want to let the people know?
No, well, other than I'm looking for fresh ideas, and whatever ideas may people have, or people who are keen to be involved with building a region. So either with your ideas or your labor, or if you want to be involved in SSA, I'd love to hear from you and interact with you and find ways that you can bring knowledge to us or help to us, or we can help with something. I want SSA to be a part of the world. So if you have an idea or something you want to bring to us, I would love to hear from you.
All right. Well, hey, his link is in the description. Go and check him out. Thanks again for coming on. It's been such a wonderful conversation.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. You guys, let us know in the comment section what your favorite part was. Also, what beard product do you use? Because you just have a wonderful beard, and I'm sure everybody's wondering.
I'm embarrassed to say I spend more money on my hair than my wife does, and she has wild, long, curly hair. And anyway, so yeah, there's oils and waxes, and it's ridiculous, but it does take work, though.
Well, it definitely pays off. Maybe one day I will have as beautiful as a beard as you. But again,
well, I hope so too.
yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming on. It's been a ton of fun, and hope everybody
Awesome.
learned something about SSA, and you guys had some good laughs.